Goodness me, what a lot of nonsense from that member opposite. And while a lot of nonsense, but I have to say what I find more interesting was who got to lead the general debate for the opposition this week. After weeks of speculation about leadership and David Parker half-page write-ups in the Herald in the weekend with one column for David Cunliffe on page 3, one paragraph, a big half page on that other chap from Wellington, Grant Robinson, and then sort of like about 3 lines for David Cunliffe sort of at the bottom of an article in the 4th section, in the business section. So there we are. We now see him there. And what has been embarrassing, though, for his leadership potential is the fact of that ridiculous call yesterday for Bill English to resign, and then he was pressured a bit, and then it was the whole government should resign. So this is a man who can cope under pressure from Simon Mersett. And he got pushed on that they should resign, and then it's the whole government should resign. What that indicates is the real level of dysfunction in the Labour Party about how they are managing their own internal problems. Look, we've seen it all before. I've lived it in so many oppositions that I've been in. I know exactly the dynamic that's going on in that party now. As there's sort of uninspired beat-ups on potential leadership candidates, those who've sort of seen themselves as the heir apparent for the last 2 years can sort of see the poison chalice slipping further and further from their grip. And that explains so much of Mr Cunliffe's quite bizarre behaviour in the last while. And it's not just Mr Cunliffe, because Phil Goff joined the story about the whole government should resign and we should have a snap election. Well, make my day was the message from here. And then he quickly, sort of reeled himself back in from that. But look, Monday night they launched their big campaign to stop asset sales in New Zealand. So it was sort of about 7 o'clock after the news cycle. Hardly anyone was there. And they wanted to stop the asset sales. The reason why they didn't get people there is because Phil Goff and Annette King were in a government that sold $9.5 billion of public assets. Phil Goff was first up to sell New Zealand Steel in 1988, Petrocorp in 1988, then he sold the Health Computing Service, then Annette King and Phil Goff were there to sell the Development Finance Corporation, remember that. Then they sold the Post Office, Phil Goff and Annette King. Do you remember when the government owned the Post Office over 20-something years ago? Well, Phil Goff and Annette King sold that. Then they sold the Shipping Corporation. Then they sold Air New Zealand. Then they sold huge amounts of Landcorp. The Rural Bank they sold. Goodness gracious, they sold the Rural Bank. Then they went and did... Phil Goff was selling the Government Printing Office with Annette King and the National Film Unit. Then Annette King and Phil Goff sold the State Insurance Office. Then they sold the whole lot. $735 million, they sold that. Then they sold the Tourist Hotel Corporation. And then Annette King and Phil Goff then sold the New Zealand Liquid Fuels and Maui Gas for $350. Then they sold Telecom. So Phil Goff doesn't even want the government to sell a quarter of anything, but he was happy to sell all of Telecom for $4.25 billion to majority foreign ownership. And then, only a few weeks before the election, he was prepared to sell the forestry cutting rights for just short of $1 billion. Is it little wonder that no one can take that voice of the past seriously when he and his deputy were in governments 20-something years ago that sold $9.5 billion worth of public assets? So they're just grasping for any issue to try and cover up their lack of policy, their lack of cohesion, and their lack of commitment to dealing with the issues that really matter to New Zealanders. Because we've not seen anyone from that party opposite really focusing on what matters to New Zealanders. and that's getting the cost of running their businesses down and focusing on job creation.
Speaker, that's the second speaker that we've heard from the